Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to The Mind's Eye, and thank you all for tuning in. Tonight I want to talk about one of my favorite albums from one of my favorite bands of all time, and this is what I would consider to be this band's unknown masterpiece. Now, certainly any diehard fan of this band is going to tell you that this is a great album, and they're more than likely going to rank this pretty close to the top of their list. However, if you find a casual fan who's maybe not as familiar with the deep cuts, maybe not as familiar with all the albums, they may not know about Fair Warning. And I think this album is every bit a masterpiece as Van Halen's other big albums like VH1, 1984, maybe even 5150. But this album just doesn't seem to get the recognition from the casual fan or the casual listener the way that those albums do. And I remember getting this album like it was yesterday, because this is one of the biggest and most important albums I think I've ever heard. It certainly changed the way that I listen to not only Van Halen, but to music. It was one of those albums that just had that kind of an impact on me. So I want to talk a little bit about how I got this album and share the story. And then I want to talk about what I love about this album. So even before I started this channel, when I was contemplating doing the YouTube thing, and I was contemplating ideas to do videos on, I knew that I wanted to do this video, and I knew that I wanted to do this video on this day, March 2nd, 2023, because this is the 20th anniversary of me getting this album. Backtrack a little bit to March 2nd of 2003. I was not quite 13 years old. I was with my dad downstairs while he was doing his paperwork. We were getting ready to watch the NASCAR race, and my mom came down and said that she had to go to Walmart for some reason. I don't remember why. But I asked her if she would get me a CD, kind of not really expecting her to say yes, but she did say yes and asked me what I wanted. So I went and I showed her the first two Van Halen albums that I owned, which was VH1 and 5150. I said, anything but these two. And she said, okay. So now certainly in the back of my mind, I definitely was wanting for some over the others. Like, I was really hoping that she would come home with 1984. I was really hoping she would come home with like Diver Down, Women and Children First, even. And really, other than Van Halen 3 and maybe OU 812, I think the farthest album from my mind was this one, Fair Warning. So when she came home and handed me this, for a split second, I was sort of disappointed that it wasn't 1984 or Diver Down, but that didn't last long, because obviously this is a new Van Halen album, and I was really excited to stick it in my CD player. And somewhere along the line, I had come across the Greatest Hits album. I don't remember if like my dad had it and gave it to me, or somehow I came across the Greatest Hits. So obviously there's only one song from this album that is on the Best of Van Halen Volume 1, that being Unchained. So that was all I knew from this album going into this. So certainly this album became my obsession for a long, long time after this. But I remember sticking this bad boy into my CD player, and the guitar intro from Mean Street just starts coming through the speakers, and it was unlike anything I'd ever heard before, and it just like blew my mind. It was one of the coolest things I've ever heard come out of a guitar, and I was hooked. I mean, I loved VH1. I thought it was a great album. Thought 5150 had its moments, but that instant, I was hooked on Van Halen. That instant, Van Halen became my new favorite band. And I was just blown away 30 seconds into this album. Absolutely mind blown. And then as soon as that guitar intro sort of fades away or sort of kind of ends, then it gives way to like the baddest ass guitar riff I've ever heard in my life. And it's dirty, it's mean, it's heavy, and it's just such a cool guitar riff from Eddie Van Halen. You can go and look on YouTube for isolated guitar tracks from Van Halen, and I can listen to Mean Street, just the isolated guitar track, and be perfectly happy. It's such a killer riff, such killer guitar work from Eddie. Some of my favorite that he's ever laid down. And that's not to mention the rest of the band. I mean, Alex Van Halen and Mike Anthony, they do their thing in this song. Great rhythm section across the entire album, really, but on Mean Street, for sure, they get off to a great start. David Lee Roth comes in, Lays down some of my favorite lyrics that he's ever put down. And it's just a great, classic, perfect Van Halen song, in my opinion. Mean Street. Great way to kick this album off. Next up, we have Dirty Movies, and it's kind of like a little bit of a bait and switch. After the heavy start that Mean Street gets you off to, Dirty Movies comes in with a nice beat from Alex Van Halen, and then Eddie comes in with some more melodic guitar work. Again, I love Eddie's guitar work in this song too. It's a lot more on the cleaner melodic side. So maybe not quite what I was expecting after Mean Street, but still really, really, really cool song. Again, strong rhythm section. I think that's a theme really throughout all of classic Van Halen, but really on this album, I think the rhythm section is just strong all the way throughout. Michael Anthony and Alex Van Halen. Of course, David Lee Roth, man. I'm a huge Dave guy. I don't dislike Sammy Hagar at all. I like Sammy Hagar. I like the Van Hagar era. I think there were a lot of good songs and good albums that came out of that era, but it just doesn't hold a candle to David Lee Roth and the classic era of Van Halen for me. David Lee Roth just had a personality and a charisma that Sammy Hagar just didn't have. And I think Roth was a much better lyricist than Hagar. And I think the way that he just brings these songs to life, I mean, these are killer songs from great musicians, and David Lee Roth just puts it over the top. And I like Dave's voice. He may not have the range that Sammy Hagar has, but I still love his voice. I actually like his voice personally more than I like Sammy's, to be honest with you. I mean, I think that Dave, he works with what he has, and he really makes it something special. Track 3, Sinner Swing, one of my favorites on the album, another heavy, heavy song. Cool guitar work from Eddie, really heavy riffs, really heavy solo, really dig. Everything about Sinner Swing is so perfect to me. Just a touch off Mean Street, in my opinion, which is probably my favorite song on the album. But Sinner Swing is great, and I love David Lee Roth's vocal delivery of this song. Some of my favorite vocal performances that he has, the way he lays these lines down is just, I can't describe it. It's why David Lee Roth is the man. So, Mean Street, certainly the third verse I really, really love when David Lee Roth comes in and is like, soon you'll see my silhouette darkening your door. I can almost taste it. I want more. No one's above suspicion. It's just, I love the way he delivers that. It's so awesome. Great song. Hear About It Later. Another more mellow song. I probably like it more than Dirty Movies. I like the guitar work a lot, but what really gets me with Hear About It Later is the bridge. The bridge is just one of those Van Halen moments that just kind of gives you the goosebumps up and down your spine. I think it's just really incredible. Unchained, of course, the song that most people are familiar with on this album. The one song I was familiar with going into this album. Great song, great guitar lick from Eddie Van Halen. And again, David Lee Roth, his personality shines on this song, especially when he starts doing the part in the breakdown with, hey, take a look at this. Hey, man, that suit is you. One break coming up. And it's the kind of thing that just gave Van Halen its personality, that when Sammy Hagar tries to do it, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't hold the same weight the way that David Lee Roth did. And it's just what made Van Halen so unique in the classic era. It was great musicianship. I always thought that, not that there's not good musicianship in the Hagar era, because there is. There's a lot of great stuff from Eddie Van Halen and the guys, a lot of great songs that they come up with. They're a little bit more radio-friendly, a little more pop-oriented. But in the classic era of Van Halen, it was just more innovative, in my opinion. Eddie was doing things that he had never heard before, and I think it was just more creative, more innovative, and Roth just brought it to life. And that's, to me, the classic era Van Halen is just about perfect. Next, we have Push Comes to Shove. I didn't like this song at first. It took me a long time to really come around to appreciate this song, but I love the rhythm section, the drum beat from Alex, and the strong bass playing from Mike Anthony in this song. David Lee Roth kind of gives a more moody vocal delivery in this track. And I think where Eddie's guitar work really starts to shine is toward the end of the song, in the guitar solo. I think that's where Eddie's guitar work really starts to shine through. So This Is Love, sort of the oddball track on this album. I think it's the popular one that always felt a little bit more like a Van Halen 2 track, or maybe even a Diver Down track to me. And a song that I always thought would have really fit well in its place would be DOA off of Van Halen 2. I always kind of wanted to hear maybe what it would sound like if those two songs swapped places. But still, So This Is Love is a pretty good song. Kicks off, again, strong rhythm section with Mike Anthony's bass playing Alex Van Halen, and then it comes in loud, and like the volume then kind of like goes down a little bit, and I'm just never really sure if they did that on purpose for some reason, or if that was an oversight that made it onto the album, but it makes the song unique. And I love the way the song ends, just the way that it kind of ends with those two notes. Boom, boom. I don't know why. I just there's something about that that always kind of got me going. So next up we have a very peculiar instrumental in Sunday Afternoon in the Park. And I wouldn't put this like on the level with like a Eruption or a Spanish Fly or even Cathedral, but this is a very interesting, very creepy song, very fitting vibe for the album. I think it fits this album very, very well. Even though it's not really so much like the crazy guitar work that Eddie was doing earlier on this album, I think he's playing it on keyboard or synth, but I'm not sure. But it's very creepy. It's very dark, and it fits. And I heard David Lee Roth once say that he pictures like a crab walking along. That's not what I picture at all. I think really kind of fitting with the name of the song, I I picture like you're walking through the park on a Sunday afternoon, pushing evening. It's getting dark out. Maybe the lights are starting to come on, and it's foggy, and you get this really sort of overwhelming sensation that somebody's watching you or somebody's following you, and like you think you see something out of the corner of your eye, and then you look, and all you see is fog, or you think you hear something, and you turn around, and there's nothing there. Just sort of that really unsettling, creepy vibe and creepy feeling, almost like you're about to be the main character of a horror movie. That's the vibe I always got from the song. And then you end things with One Foot Out the Door, which is just a short little, almost 2-minute long song. Really, really meant to just kind of fill out this album and give it a couple extra minutes of runtime. But I think what I really love about it, it does rock, but Eddie's solo at the end is really, really killer. And I think it's sort of fitting to end this album on a killer solo the way that Eddie starts it. And to me, this is sort of the overlooked Van Halen masterpiece, at least among the casual fans. So let me know in the comments below what you guys think of Fair Warning. I gave you my story of how I discovered this album and how I got this album. So I'd like to hear how you guys discovered it, or the story that you guys have attached to this album. I think that's one of the fun things about music is everybody's story with what it means to them and how they discover it and all that. I think that's really fun to hear. So I'm looking forward to hearing you guys in the comments section. Give me a thumbs up if you like this kind of video, please, and subscribe to my channel for more stuff like this in the future. And I'll catch you next time.